progress. We talked about going into the break about Israel. You bring that up. Let's turn now to the Middle East. What we saw happen this past week was something that was relatively rare. A sitting Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State touring the region, and they went to various capitals in the Middle East, and they went there with arms deals in their hands, trying to work out a peace deal there in the region. This does sound like we've gone back to the future in that region, doesn't it?
I agree. I mean, here's the problem: is we've had a flawed strategy from the get-go. When we invaded Iraq, what did that do? It actually led to an expansion of Iranian influence.
Right.
So these measures by Gates and Rice and the Bush administration are an attempt to contain Iranian influence, but at the same time, we're boosting an Iraqi government that is closely aligned with Iran.
Explain to me how that contains Iran. If first of all, we have an American presence in Iraq, right next door. We have an American presence in Afghanistan, right, and a NATO presence there as well. And that has not stopped Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons. It has not stopped their ambitions for the region. So how is it then that putting more weapons in Saudi Arabia's hands or in Egypt's hands is going to do that?
Well, part of this is addressing what the Gulf countries are afraid of with Iran, with their burgeoning military and their possibility of getting nuclear weapons. This is in response to this. These Gulf countries who are on the southern side and the western side of the Persian Gulf, they're afraid of Iran. Now, the weapons deals are only part of a much broader picture. The U.S. has a long-standing commitment to stability and security in the Middle East. And the Secretaries Rice and Gates' trip to the Middle East is just part of that. The weapons component is the most newsworthy aspect of it, but it's part of a much longer relationship between our government and the Middle East.
It's newsworthy because it's tens of billions of dollars. We're not talking about just a couple of planes here and there. And there's also the question about what happens if one day these American weapons are used somehow, some way in the deaths of Israelis or in Americans at some point. We're looking back at what happened in Afghanistan a few years ago.
This trip came on the heels of Ambassador Khalilzad, our ambassador to the UN, saying that Saudi Arabia is not helping us in Iraq. And in fact, if you look at the intel reports, that a lot of the suicide bombers come from Saudi Arabia, the ones that are in Iraq. So serious concerns about whether or not, who can we trust in this part of the world? It's quite dicey.
Stephen, does this mean then that the neocon dream is dead, officially? I mean, this is exactly what they said they did not want to do, right? They didn't want to support any non-democratic regimes and not send any signals of not needing to change there, but giving these unconditional arms deals to regimes that aren't democratic at all. That tells them they don't need to change.
Well, I don't pretend to speak on behalf of all neocons, and I don't think I would call myself a neocon, but security and stability and democracy promotion and freedom are all things that by country and by region have to be balanced against one another. It should be noted that for these arms deals that are going on right now, Israel has pointedly and publicly stated that they are not opposed to it.
Why? Why do you think that is?
Because they realize, as our government realizes, that greater security in the Persian Gulf area is necessary, especially to provide a deterrence to a resurgent Iran. They understand that. Now, back in '81, when Ronald Reagan sold AWAC aircraft to Saudi Arabia, Israel was up in arms and very publicly against that arms sale. With this recent trip, though, Israel has come out and said that they are not concerned, and they understand the equities that are at stake.
All right, final thought here. Barack Obama's words about if Pakistan won't go after al-Qaeda in Pakistan's territory, then the U.S. will. What do you make of those words and the consequences of following up on a policy like that?
Well, first, I think it's important to have leaders say that we're going to go after the global al-Qaeda leadership. It's something that we didn't do for the last 5 or 6 years.
But to invade a country that has nuclear weapons, that's a smart thing to do?
Well, you got to be careful, and I think he was talking about tactical. We've done these sorts of operations in Somalia recently. When you have good intel, you should actually act on that intel, and I think that's what he's saying. The Bush administration in 2005 had that, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. And that's a danger, because why? Because many of the threats, including the most recent British terror attacks, they emanated from where? Western Pakistan and Afghanistan, and we're caught in a referee in a civil war in Iraq, and we're taking an eye off the ball by not addressing this threat. So I think it's important to do.
All right, Stephen, final thought.
His statements were unoriginal and naive. We already make surgical strikes in Pakistan. General Musharraf condemns them. We already make those strikes. The difference is we don't trumpet them from the rooftops because they are covert surgical strikes. To say it out loud as part of a presidential stump speech was just out of hand.
Ironically, he sounded more like Bush Cheney light when he said those things, at least to some of us.
But the Bush administration refused to do some of these operations when they had good intel, and that's an important point.
We'll pick it up next time. Right.
Yeah.
Katulis, Stephen Groves, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good summer.
Thank you.
All right.